The Art of the Explosion. Now, there are troubles that come at a man sudden, like a wasp down the collar, and there are troubles that set in slow and patient, like a splinter working its way toward the bone, and it was the second kind that had taken up residence in Larry's mind. He lived just outside of Knoll, Missouri, in a piece of country called Blankenship Hollow, and Knoll itself was home to something in the neighborhood of 900 souls who had settled along the Elk River and seemed disinclined to leave it. In the summer of 1965, the bluffs along the two-lane road threw their shade generously over the tourists who came by the thousands to camp along the water, and where the hills weren't cleared for farming, they were, in the manner of the Ozarks generally, cluttered up with rock. It was one rock in particular, in fact, that had lodged itself in Larry's thinking the way a burr lodges in a dog's ear, impossible to ignore and unreasonably difficult to remove. The road out of Knoll toward the county seat of Pineville ran alongside the river with the bluffs rising on the other side, and it went by the plain name of the Knoll to Pineville Road, the folks thereabouts not being much given to fancy titles. A number of smaller roads wandered off from it, and one of these, a dirt track called Blankenship Road, met the larger road not far from where Larry and his wife Nancy kept house near his parents. At that junction, a rocky outcrop had seen fit to creep off the shoulder and lean a little way into the road itself. Only a little, but a little was plenty for Larry. He tolerated this insolent rock for as long as a reasonable man could be expected to, and then he couldn't tolerate it any further, obsession being what it is. He took up a heavy pry bar and went at the thing, jabbing the pointed end into it with the sort of grim determination a man usually saves for enemies of a personal nature. When his arms had had enough of this argument, he stepped back to take stock, and he had to admit, if only to himself, that at the rate he was going, the job would take him the better part of a season. It was right about then that he recollected his father telling him of a similar quarrel with a similar rock, settled in the end by dynamite, and Larry knew there was but one man in Knoll who dealt in that commodity, and his name was Forrest Harmon. A body could hardly spend a nickel in Knoll in those days without some part of it finding its way into Forrest Harmon's pocket, for he owned the lumber yard, the water company, and Harmon's Hardware besides. At the hardware store on Main Street, a fellow could buy a screwdriver or a hammer or any manner of nuts and bolts. But the store was a good deal more than a place to buy hardware. Boys stood about swinging a Louisville Slugger bat or turning a new baseball over in their hands while their fathers sighted down a Winchester Model 94 that had been lifted off the wall for closer inspection. And it was, all told, about as fine a place to loiter as the town had to offer. Forrest generally greeted the customers himself, or his son Dan did the honors, and when neither man was walking the floor, they could usually be found at the island of counters in the middle of the store where the old cash register sat. Dan's wife, Roseanne, spent her days bent over the account books, writing out invoices for the customers who preferred to settle their bills later rather than sooner. On a mild spring morning, Larry came through the door, and Forrest greeted him as he always did. "Afternoon, Larry. How you doing?" "Fine, Forrest, how are you?" Larry replied. Larry then politely asked about Dan and Roseanne. Forrest said he's fine, and Roseanne is busy as ever with those darn books. Then Forrest asked what he could do for him, and Larry, not being a man to waste words, said, "I need some dynamite." Forrest didn't so much as blink at this. "We keep that stuff in the lumber yard just down the street. Dean Isham's over there, he'll take care of you." Larry allowed that he'd mosey on over, and Forrest sent him off with the friendly warning not to go and blow himself up, delivered with a face as straight as a fence post. At the lumber yard, Dean Isham asked what he could do for him, and Larry told him he'd need 2 sticks of dynamite, a few blasting caps, and a length of fuse cord. "Gonna blow something up, are you?" Dean asked, and Larry said he was, a rock that had been bothering him considerably. Dean went off to the storeroom and came back with the goods, including 2 sticks of Hercules dynamite, and there wasn't a form to sign nor a promise asked for, and nary a single question raised about what use the explosives might be put to. The whole transaction being conducted on a trust that would astonish a modern man. Dean cautioned him too, same as Forrest had, not to blow himself up, and Larry paid for his purchase and went on his way. Driving that bumpy road home, Larry couldn't keep his eyes off the small box on the seat beside him, where the dynamite, the caps, and the fuse sat looking a good deal more ordinary than their reputation suggested. When he got to the house, he found Nancy sitting quietly in the high-back chair in the front room, and she asked if he'd got it, and he told her he had, and that they'd best go blow up that rock. Nancy rose up out of the worn cushion without much fuss, and the two of them walked down to the intersection of Blankenship Road and the knoll to Pineville Road. Larry took a steel spud bar and worked a small hole into the rock, remembering as he did that his father had once told him a pocket knife could slice a piece off a stick of dynamite same as it could slice off a plug of tobacco. He drew his worn case strapper from his pocket and opened the blade, studied the rock and the dynamite for a moment, and said, "Maybe 2 or so inches," and made his cut. He set the dynamite into the little crevice, fixed the blasting cap and the fuse to it, and hoped he judged the burning time about right. He asked Nancy for the matches without so much as looking her way, his eyes busy scouting the ground for a place that might serve as shelter, and he settled on a spot across the dirt road. Nancy dropped the box of matches into his open palm, and he struck one and touched it to the fuse. The two of them crossed over, stuck their index fingers in their ears and waited on the blast. What came was a muffled thud, more of a puff than an explosion, along with a wisp of smoke and a queer smell not unlike bananas. "Well, we need more dynamite, I guess," Larry said, not much impressed. They tried it again with 4 inches of the stick, and the result left him just as unsatisfied. "It's time to use the rest of the stick," he declared, and Nancy told him that might be so, but he ought to be careful about it. Larry packed the remainder of the dynamite into the hole, lit the fuse, and the pair retreated once more to their chosen shelter. This time the explosion came almighty and sudden, and both threw their heads back to watch a chunk of rock the size of a basketball go sailing up into the blue morning sky. It didn't merely fly, it soared, turning over once in the air with a kind of unhurried grace, as though it had all the time in creation to admire the view before coming down, and it passed clean over the heads of Larry and Nancy before it dropped into the waters of Blankenship Creek across the way with a splash that seemed almost an afterthought. Nancy watched it go with an expression a more generous narrator might call aghast, though truthfully, she was only moderately surprised, being a woman not easily rattled. "Gosh," Larry said once the smoke had thinned out, and Nancy allowed as how gosh about covered it. They walked over to look at what remained of the rock and found it loosened up so thoroughly that the pry bar alone made short work of the rest. They started back toward the house along the knoll to Pineville Road, taking their time about it, and after a spell Nancy remarked, in the same easy tone she might have used to comment on the weather, that it might have been a touch too much dynamite. Larry considered this at some length, the way a man considers a truth he isn't eager to arrive at, and finally admitted that maybe so. Maybe so.